5 conspiracy theories that have been debunked by the squad. There have been 5 conspiracy theories that 45, the squatter, has basically tried to put out there, and they've all been debunked. Even though 45 and his inbred supporters will still believe it, even with the theories being debunked. Coming from Washington, from his earliest days of squatting in the White House, 45 has unleashed a stream of unsupported assertions aimed at undermining one concrete fact. The Russian government conducted a sophisticated influence operation to sway the outcome of the 2016 U.S. squatter roll election in 45's favor. Special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation was a witch hunt that resulted in his complete and total exoneration, which we know that wasn't true. He wasn't exonerated. 45 has said the deep state is out to get him. His predecessor, Barack Obama, tapped his phones and the FBI spied on his campaign. Also, those two are also been debunked. 45's claims about Ukraine, which have touched off the current impeachment inquiry, can also be traced directly to Russia's 2016 election interference. His efforts to finger another culprit, Ukraine, even though his own advisors had warned him that Ukraine had played no such role. It's not only a conspiracy theory. All of these theories have been completely debunked. Tom Bossert, 45's former Homeland Security and Counterterrorism advisor, told ABC News in September of the Ukraine meddling election. Indeed, U.S. intelligence concluded nearly 3 years ago that Russian President Vladimir Putin was culpable. Putin ordered an influence campaign in 2016 aimed at the U.S. squatter roll election, states a January 2017 report from the Director of National Intelligence. Russia's goals were to undermine public faith in the U.S. democratic process, denigrate Secretary Clinton, and harm her electability and potential presidency. We further assess Putin and the Russian government developed a clear preference for squatter-elect 45. Now Washington is racing for a new round of allegations and spin on Monday when the Department of Justice internal watchdog is scheduled to release a much-anticipated report on the origins of the Russia investigation. Here's a guide to the facts and the fictions behind some of 45's Russia-Ukraine assertions now in the news. On 45's spying theory, 45 has repeatedly accused FBI of spying on his 2016 campaign. My campaign for squatter was conclusively spied on. He tweeted in May of this year, this was treason. He basically said, what we know about this debunked theory. From what we know, there is no evidence that the FBI spied on 45's campaign. The Department of Justice internal watchdog Michael Horitz is expected to confirm that the FBI did not place any informants inside the campaign or place any wiretaps on 45's phones. The FBI did investigate whether 45 campaign officials conspired with Russians to sway the outcome of the election. As part of that probe, they sought a court order to wiretap Carter Page, a former 45 blower, who was this foreign policy advisor. The FBI believed that Page was collaborating and conspiring with the Russian government in an effort to interfere in the squatter roll election, according to FBI documents released after USA Today and other media organizations sued the agency. Four federal judges separately approved the surveillance request each time, saying the government had shown probable cause that Page was acting as an agent of the Russian government. Page reportedly attracted the FBI's attention as far back as 2013 because of his interactions with Russian intelligence agents. Mueller took over the FBI's investigation in May of 2017 and eventually indicted 36 individuals and entities, including 6 former 45 blowers, all of whom have either pleaded guilty or been convicted by a jury. 45's witch hunt theory. The squatter has repeatedly called the investigation into Russia's interference in the 2016 election a witch hunt, which started under false pretenses by his political enemies. That's what he claims, but this was not false pretenses. He has relentlessly focused on 2 FBI employees involved in the Russia probe, Lisa Page and Peter Strzok, who were having an extramarital affair. We have a lot of information that a lot of bad things happened, 45 told Foe in the November 22 interview. He said Page and Strzok were intent on taking him down and ensuring that Hillary Clinton, his Democratic opponent, won. The insurance policy that was very big find. Finding that text, 45 said, referring to text between what we know about this. There was no question that Page, who served as the FBI's assistant general counsel, and Strzok, who was a deputy assistant director of the FBI's counterintelligence division, opposed 45. In 2017, the Justice Department's Inspector General will disclose text messages between the pair labeling 45's campaign loathsome and fretting over his possible election. In one message, Page wrote, 45's not ever going to become squatter, right? No, he's not. We'll stop it, Strzok responded. In another message, Strzok wrote that he wanted to believe 45 would not win, but I'm afraid we can't take that risk, he adds. It's like an insurance policy and they'll likely bet you die before 40. 45 and Republican lawmakers and 45 and Republican lawmakers seized on the messages as evidence that the FBI officials were politically biased and misused their powers to launch the probe into 45's campaign. Page and Strzok, during separate testimony before Congress last year, both said the insurance policy reference reflected an internal debate about how quickly the FBI should move forward with the counterintelligence investigation. Page wanted to be cautious so as not to burn a source, and she argued that 45 was unlikely to be elected given polls showing that Clinton was ahead. Page argued that we don't need to go at a total breakneck speed because so long as he doesn't become squatter, there isn't the same threat to national security, right? According to a transcript of her closed-door testimony. But if he became squatter, that totally changes the game, she recounted. He's going to immediately start receiving classified briefings. He's going to be exposed to the most sensitive secrets imaginable, and if there's somebody on his team who unwillingly is working with the Russians, that is serious. Strzok told lawmakers that he took the opposite view, arguing for an aggressive timeline in case 45 won because of the national security implications. They both denied that political bias played a role in their decisions, and Page said other members of the team were anti-Clinton, but that too did not influence the FBI's work. Horowitz is expected to conclude that a political bias did not cloud the FBI's work, according to the Washington Post. There's no conspiracy theory to unseat 45 or defeat him. There was no treason. There was no sedition, said James Baker, the FBI's former general counsel who oversaw the launch of the Russia investigation. I would never have allowed such a thing. The Washington Post and the New York Times have reported that in his report, Horowitz will criticize the actions of some FBI employees and raise questions about the agency's surveillance procedures, but he's expected to conclude the Russia probe was opened on an appropriate legal and factual basis, dispatching the GOP a narrative that its origins were illegitimate. 45's DNC server theory. In their July 25th phone call, 45 pressured Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky to investigate unfounded allegations that Ukraine interfered in the 2016 U.S. election. I would like you to find out what happened with this whole situation with Ukraine. They say CrowdStrike, the server they say Ukraine has at 45 sent to Zelensky. 45's statement seems to be based on a fringe theory spread on right-wing websites and promoted by his personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, alleging that Ukraine and the Democratic National Committee fabricated a hack to sabotage 45's 2016 campaign and frame Russia. What we know, CrowdStrike is a private cybersecurity firm that investigated the breach of the DNC's computers in 2016. The firm concluded that it was the work of hackers connected to Russian intelligence services. Federal investigators and other analysts have confirmed CrowdStrike's conclusions. Mueller, in his probe of Russia election interference, indicted 12 Russian military intelligence officers for the hacking scheme, which targeted the DNC and Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign as part of the Kremlin's effort to undermine the 2016 election. Then this indictment states that the Russians engaged in a sustained effort to penetrate the most sensitive repositories of information held by the Democratic Party. CrowdStrike said in a statement that it stands by its findings and turned over all of its evidence to the FBI. We provided all forensic evidence and analysts to the FBI as requested, this firm said. 45's Ukraine 2016 meddling theory. In a May 23rd meeting at the White House, 45 told Colt Volcker, then his special envoy for Ukraine, that the country was full of terrible people who tried to take him down. And in his July 25th phone call with Zelensky, he suggested that Ukraine had a role in the 2016 election interference. They say a lot of it started with Ukraine, 45 said to Zelensky after mentioning Mueller's probe. The notion that Ukraine meddled in the U.S. election is false. While some individual Ukrainian officials expressed support for Clinton and concern about 45 because of his friendly statements towards Russia, which has attacked Ukraine's sovereignty, there was no orchestrated effort by Ukraine's government to sway the contest. Just last week, David Hale, a top State Department official, testified that Russia, not Ukraine, interfered in the 2016 U.S. squatter role election. In testimony before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Hale agreed it would serve Russia's interest to push that false narrative about its neighbor. Have you seen any intelligence assessment or any open source reporting that would support the idea that Ukraine interfered in our 2016 election? Senator Chris, who's a Democrat for Delaware, asked Hale during the hearing. I have seen nothing that's credible along those lines, he responded. 45's fake dossier theory. 45 and his GOP allies have also vilified Christopher Steele, an ex-British intelligence officer and GPS Fusion, the research firm that hired Steele to investigate 45's ties to Russia during the 2016 campaign. Steele, who had run with the British spies intelligence agency, Russia's desk for several years, compiled the now infamous dossier that included salacious allegations about 45. Republicans say the FBI improperly used the unverified dossier to win court approval for its wiretap and Carter Page's communications, arguing that agents failed to disclose that Steele's work was being paid for in part by lawyers for Clinton. But copies of the wiretap surveillance allegations show that the FBI did disclose to judges that Steele sought information to discredit 45, and the FBI's counterintelligence investigation of 45 was launched after the FBI learned that another campaign aide, George Papadopoulos, boasted to an Australian diplomat that Russia had offered the 45 campaign damaging information on Clinton. Horowitz reviewed the FBI's communications with Steele as part of his internal investigation. He is reportedly expected to criticize some of the former British spy's work, but it's not clear how far he will go in feeling or contradicting 45's claims. Yeah, so all these theories have been debunked, but 45 and his inbred supporters still believe that all this shit happened. And there's no convincing them otherwise.